One tree, 100 trees, one answer. Welcome to this Bioinfo Bytes explainer, where we're diving right into the ultimate data science dilemma. On one side, we got the highly transparent decision tree, and on the other, the raw, unstoppable predictive power of the random forest. We're going to see exactly how we get from a single, simple, logical flowchart to a massive, chaotic ensemble. Trust me, it'll completely change how you view automated decision-making. So imagine for a second an algorithm denies your mortgage application. What do you want? Would you rather have a system that can explain exactly why it rejected you, even if it's occasionally wrong? Or would you prefer a highly complex black box that is 99.9% accurate, but absolutely no human alive can explain its underlying math, right? That is the exact tension we're unpacking today. Okay, here is our roadmap for today. We're covering 1, the strict bouncer, 2, splitting rules, 3, the overfitting problem, 4, chaotic democracy, and finally 5, the ultimate trade-off. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The strict bouncer. Decision trees.
In supervised machine learning, a decision tree acts exactly like a rigid, ultra-strict bouncer holding a flowchart. You start at the very top at what's called a root node, and then, based on specific features, your data gets pushed down through these branches, which act as the rules, until it hits the final leaf nodes. That leaf node gives you your prediction. It's incredibly simple, highly interpretable, and you can quite literally draw its entire logic right on a whiteboard. Let's actually look at how this plays out in a bioinformatics context, like DNA analysis. You start at the root node with a totally unknown genetic sequence. The tree applies the criterion to a feature, so maybe it's checking for a specific sequence motif. Depending on that answer, you follow the branch to the next node, check another feature, and you do this step by step until you finally reach a terminal leaf node that just gives you a clear decision. Like, boom, this region is coding or this region is non-coding. Moving on to section 2, splitting rules, Gini and entropy. Now, you might be wondering, how does the tree mathematically decide exactly where and how to split the data at each of those internal nodes to get the most accurate leaf nodes? Well, it generally relies on one of two main metrics: Gini impurity or information gain, which is based on entropy. Gini impurity tries to minimize misclassification, basically measuring how often a randomly chosen element would be labeled wrong. It is super popular because it doesn't require computing complex logarithmic functions. It's just computationally very fast. On the flip side, information gain looks at the reduction in entropy, measuring the consistency or purity of the child nodes. It's slightly slower to calculate, sure, but mathematically really rigorous. But honestly, while data scientists love to debate Gini versus entropy, the literature shows it barely changes the actual outcome. They differ in maybe 2% of cases. As you can see from our source material here, it's actually how you control the tree's growth, a process called pruning, that truly dictates how well your model is going to perform.
Which brings us to section 3, the overfitting problem.
You see, the single decision tree has an absolutely fatal flaw. If you let it grow unchecked, it encounters a massive, massive problem: overfitting. It essentially takes reality way too literally. It ends up memorizing the specific noise and chaotic outliers of its training data instead of finding the actual generalizable pattern underneath it all. It's exactly like a student who memorizes the exact wording of a practice test, right? But then completely fails the real exam because the questions are phrased just slightly differently. To stop the tree from just growing infinitely deep and memorizing all that noise, we have to artificially restrict it using regularization techniques. We can set a maximum depth limit, which means the tree is only allowed to branch so many times. Or we set a minimum sample split, demanding a node have a specific number of observations before it's even allowed to divide again. We can also use a validation dataset to literally prune away the least helpful branches after the training is done.
All right, section 4, enter the random forest.
If you want to truly fix this instability, you don't just meticulously prune a single tree. As formally introduced by Leo Bremen in his seminal 1999 paper, the ultimate solution is injecting randomness. Instead of relying on one deep, overfitted tree, you grow a massive ensemble of slightly different trees and you let them vote for the most popular classification. Let's look at section 5, building a chaotic democracy.
Building a forest essentially transforms our rigid bouncer into a chaotic democracy of highly specialized experts. But how do you ensure the trees are actually different from one another? If you feed them all the exact same data, they're just going to make the exact same mistakes. The forest achieves its diversity through two absolutely vital mechanisms. First is Bootstrap Sampling, also known as bagging. Every single tree is fed a slightly skewed dataset, sampled randomly with replacement from the original data. Second is random feature selection. When a tree is deciding how to split, it's only allowed to look at a random subset of variables. This forces every single tree to specialize differently and completely prevents one dominant feature from hijacking the entire model. And finally, all these diverse trees cast a majority vote to make the final prediction.
Because all these trees are learning from completely different, randomized slices of reality, their individual, uncorrelated errors just mathematically cancel each other out. Some trees might overestimate, sure, and some might underestimate, but by pooling their diverse opinions together, the forest drastically reduces the model's overall variance without actually increasing the bias. And that brings us to Section 6, the ultimate trade-off. When it comes down to choosing between a single tree and an entire forest for your specific application, you really have to weigh which you value more. A single decision tree is lightning fast to train and highly interpretable. I mean, you can perfectly trace its logic. But, as we discussed, it's super prone to overfitting. A random forest, because of its ensemble nature, is incredibly robust against overfitting. But the catch? It takes much more computational time, and most importantly, it becomes a literal black box, where you completely lose that direct interpretability. Because of these specific traits, a single tree works wonderfully in something like finance, say basic credit risk scoring, where regulators demand a very clear, auditable paper trail for exactly why a decision was made. But the random forest, it totally dominates when you're predicting complex, high-dimensional outcomes in bioinformatics. We're talking inferring taxonomic placement from DNA barcodes, mapping intricate protein-protein interaction databases, identifying sequence coding regions, or ranking genes for biomarker discovery and drug toxicity prediction in cancer genomics. In those cases, raw accuracy is just absolutely paramount. Ultimately, it comes down to exactly what you need your data to do. One single decision tree flawlessly explains the logic of the past, making the why perfectly clear. But an entire random forest powerfully predicts the chaos of the future. So the next time you're looking at automated decisions, whether it's a loan approval or a complex genetic sequence classification, you really have to ask yourself, are you willing to trade the perfect transparency of the strict bouncer for the unparalleled but totally unexplainable accuracy of the crowd? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the data.